The crimson moon hung heavy over the battlefield where Captain Marcus Chen lay dying among the scattered remnants of his squad. His standard-issue plasma rifle had been destroyed hours ago, and the emergency beacon in his tactical vest had fallen silent after taking shrapnel from a Kethmoran energy cannon. Blood seeped through the cracks in his combat armor as he stared up at the alien sky, watching the twin moons of Valthera Prime cast their eerie glow across the devastated landscape. The mission had been straightforward on paper. Extract Princess Lyralii Shadowmere from the abandoned Valthan research facility before the Kethmoran advance reached her location. Intelligence suggested she was being held in a standard detention cell, another political prisoner in the endless war between the Galactic Coalition and the insectoid Kethmoran Empire. What intelligence had failed to mention was that Princess Lyralii was no ordinary alien noble. Marcus pressed his hand against the puncture wound in his abdomen, feeling the warmth of his life force flowing between his fingers. The Kethmoran patrol that had ambushed them was dead now, their chitinous bodies scattered across the rocky terrain like broken shells. But victory had come at a terrible price. Sergeant Rodriguez lay motionless 20 meters away, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Corporal Kim had taken a plasma bolt to the chest and died instantly. Private Jackson had lasted longer, screaming for his mother until blood filled his lungs and silenced him forever. The facility loomed ahead like a monument to some forgotten nightmare. Its black towers stretched toward the alien sky, covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift and writhe in the moonlight. The architecture was neither human nor Kethmoran, but something far older and more unsettling. Intelligence had classified it as a research station, but Marcus could feel something wrong about the place. The air itself felt thick with malevolent energy that made his skin crawl and his combat instincts scream warnings. Marcus forced himself to stand, gritting his teeth against the pain that shot through his wounded body. His orders were clear. Retrieve the princess and get her to the extraction point, no matter the cost. The fact that his entire squad was dead and his own life was measured in hours rather than days was irrelevant. A soldier followed orders until his last breath, and Marcus had been a soldier for 15 years. He would complete this mission or die trying. The facility's main entrance had been blown open by some previous battle, leaving a gaping hole surrounded by twisted metal and scorched stone. Marcus activated his tactical flashlight and stepped through the breach, immediately feeling the temperature drop by several degrees. The interior was a maze of corridors lined with what appeared to be holding cells, each one sealed with energy barriers that flickered weakly in the dim emergency lighting. Most of the cells were empty, but some contained the desiccated remains of creatures Marcus could not identify. They looked humanoid but wrong somehow, as if someone had tried to recreate human anatomy from a half-remembered description. Their skin was paper-thin and stretched tight over prominent bones, and their mouths hung open in silent screams that had lasted for centuries. Marcus followed the facility map downloaded to his tactical display, navigating through the labyrinthine passages while trying to ignore the whispers that seemed to follow him through the shadows. The wound in his abdomen was getting worse, and he could feel his strength ebbing with each step. But he pressed on, driven by duty and the knowledge that somewhere in this nightmare, a princess waited for rescue. The detention level was deeper than the others, accessible only through a heavily armored elevator that still functioned despite the facility's apparent abandonment. As Marcus descended into the bowels of the structure, he noticed that the whispers grew louder and more distinct. They spoke in languages he did not recognize, but somehow he understood their meaning. They spoke of hunger and ancient thirsts, of power that could reshape the very fabric of reality. The elevator shuddered to a halt, and the doors opened with a pneumatic hiss that echoed through the narrow corridor beyond. This level was different from the others. The walls were smoother, almost organic in appearance, and they pulsed with a faint bioluminescent glow that reminded Marcus of a beating heart. The air was thick with the scent of copper and something else he could not identify but which triggered every survival instinct in his enhanced human brain. Marcus checked his sidearm and advanced cautiously down the corridor, following the map's guidance toward the high-security detention block. Each step sent fresh waves of pain through his wounded body, but he pushed through the discomfort with the practiced discipline of a veteran soldier. The tactical display showed his destination was less than 50 meters ahead, behind multiple layers of security that had somehow been breached from the inside. The final security door stood open, its massive frame twisted outward as if something incredibly powerful had torn it apart from within. Marcus stepped through the breach and found himself in a circular chamber dominated by a single detention cell in the center. The cell itself was a masterwork of alien engineering, constructed from some crystalline material that seemed to absorb light while simultaneously emitting its own inner radiance. Inside the cell sat Princess Lyralii Shadowmere, and Marcus immediately understood why intelligence had been so wrong about this mission. She was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful. Her skin was pale as starlight but possessed a luminous quality that made it seem to glow from within. Her hair was silver white and fell in waves past her shoulders, framing a face that combined classical elegance with something predatory and wild. But it was her eyes that marked her as something other than human. They were deep crimson, like pools of fresh blood, and they held an intelligence that spoke of centuries rather than decades. When she looked up at Marcus, her lips curved into a smile that revealed elongated canine teeth as sharp as surgical instruments. "A human warrior," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate in his bones. "How unexpected. I can smell your blood from here, soldier. You are dying." Marcus raised his weapon but kept it pointed at the floor. Standard protocol demanded that he identify himself and explain the rescue operation, but something about this situation felt fundamentally wrong. The intelligence briefing had described Princess Lyralii as a political prisoner, a victim of Kathmoran aggression who needed extraction. The creature before him looked like many things, but victim was not one of them. "Princess Shadowmere," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the pain. "I am Captain Marcus Chen of the Terran Colonial Marines. I am here to extract you from this facility." She laughed, and the sound was like silver bells mixed with the whisper of steel being drawn from a sheath. "Extract me? Oh, dear Captain, I fear there has been some misunderstanding. I am not being held prisoner here. This facility was built to contain me, and these barriers are not meant to keep others out. They are meant to keep me in." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the facility's temperature. "I don't understand. The mission briefing said you were captured by Kathmoran forces. The Kathmorans found this place by accident while fleeing from one of your human battle groups," she explained, rising gracefully to her feet. "When they realized what I was, they fled in terror. Even insects have more sense than to disturb certain ancient powers. But humans, it seems, are remarkably persistent in their ignorance." She approached the barrier that separated them, and Marcus could see that her movements held an inhuman fluidity that reminded him of flowing water. "Tell me, Captain Chen, what do you know of the Veilthan Empire?" Marcus searched his memory for any reference to that name and found nothing. "I've never heard of them." "Of course you have not. They fell to ruin 3,000 years before your species learned to make fire. But they were great once, masters of technologies that could reshape matter and energy at will. They were also the first to encounter my kind among the stars." The tactical display on Marcus's armor was beginning to flicker and fail as his power systems weakened along with his body. He estimated he had perhaps an hour left before blood loss rendered him unconscious. The smart thing to do would be to activate his emergency beacon and wait for backup, but something told him that backup might not be enough for whatever was happening here. "What are you?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "I am what your species would call a vampire," she said simply. "Though that term fails to capture the true scope of what we are. We are evolution's answer to the question of perfect predators. We are hunger given form and consciousness. We are eternal, provided we have sufficient nourishment." Marcus felt his grip tighten on his sidearm despite the growing weakness in his arms. "And you feed on blood." "Among other things," she confirmed. "Blood carries life force, and life force sustains us. But we can also feed on less tangible things. Emotions, memories, the spark that makes a being more than mere chemistry and electrical impulses. Your species has such vibrant life force, Captain. I can taste it from here, even through these barriers." The implications of that statement settled over Marcus like a cold blanket. "The Veilthans built this prison to contain you. They built this entire facility around my cell," she corrected. "It took them decades to create containment systems that could hold one of my kind. The barriers you see are woven from quantum energies that exist partially outside normal spacetime. Even I cannot simply tear through them, though I have had plenty of time to study their weaknesses." Marcus looked around the chamber with new understanding. The organic appearance of the walls, the pulsing bioluminescence, the whispers he had heard throughout the facility. It was not abandoned at all. It was alive, part of some vast containment system that had been running continuously for millennia. "How long have you been here?" he asked. "Time moves differently in this place," she said, turning away from the barrier to pace within her cell. But, I estimate approximately 2,000 of your years, give or take a few centuries. Long enough to grow quite familiar with these walls. Long enough to study every nuance of the prison's construction. Long enough to discover that while the barriers prevent me from leaving, they do not prevent others from entering. The words sent ice through Marcus's veins as their meaning became clear. You are asking me to free you. I am offering you a bargain, Captain Marcus Chen. She returned to the barrier, and her crimson eyes seemed to burn within her fire. You are dying. I can smell death on you like perfume. Your human medicine cannot save you from wounds that severe, not without medical facilities you do not possess. But, I can. Marcus felt his legs beginning to tremble as his body struggled to compensate for blood loss. The smart thing to do would be to refuse and call for backup. But backup was hours away, and he would be dead long before they arrived. Even if they could reach him in time, there was no guarantee they could extract him safely from a facility designed to contain supernatural predators. What kind of bargain? He asked, surprised by how calm his voice sounded. Blood for blood, she said simply. You give me enough of your life force to sustain me through the escape from this prison, and I will share my immortal essence with you. You will live, Captain. You will be stronger and faster than any baseline human. You will heal from injuries that would kill ordinary men. You will have centuries to accomplish whatever goals drive you. Marcus laughed, though it came out as more of a wheeze. And the catch? There is always a catch, she agreed with that predatory smile. You will be bound to me. Not as a slave, but as something more than a servant and less than an equal. Your life force will be connected to mine. If I am destroyed, you die. If you travel too far from me, you weaken and, eventually perish. We will be linked until one of us chooses to sever the bond, and I assure you that I have no intention of doing so. The offer hung in the air between them like a sword. Marcus could feel his consciousness beginning to fade around the edges as his body finally began to shut down from blood loss. In a few minutes, the decision would be made for him. He would die here in this alien prison, another casualty of humanity's expansion into a galaxy that held dangers beyond their comprehension. But he was a colonial marine, trained to assess tactical situations and make decisions under pressure. The mission parameters had changed, but the core objective remained the same. Extract the princess, regardless of cost. If binding his life to hers was the price of completing the mission, then perhaps it was a price worth paying. Marcus looked up at her through the transparent barrier that separated them. If I agree to this, will you come with me? Will you leave this place and return to human space? Oh yes, she said, her eyes practically glowing with anticipation. I have been imprisoned here for so very long, Captain. I am quite eager to see what has become of the galaxy during my absence. And your human empire sounds absolutely fascinating. So much life, so much energy, so much potential for nourishment. The way she said that last word made Marcus's skin crawl, but he was past the point of having better options. How do I know you will keep your word? Because our bond will make betrayal impossible, she said. If I harm you significantly, I harm myself. If I abandon you, I lose a valuable source of sustenance. It is in my best interest to keep you alive and healthy, Captain. Though I make no promises about your continued humanity. Marcus felt a laugh escape his lips despite everything. I stopped being fully human the day I volunteered for enhancement surgery. What's one more modification? He holstered his sidearm and walked toward the barrier, each step requiring tremendous effort as his body continued to fail. Princess Lyralii watched him approach with obvious hunger, her crimson eyes tracking the movement of blood through his veins as if she could see it directly. How do we do this? Marcus asked when he reached the barrier. Place your hand against the quantum field, she instructed. The contact will allow a small portion of your essence to pass through while opening a gap I can exploit. But, be warned, Captain. Once you begin this process, there is no going back. The bond between us will be forged in your life force, and it will endure until death parts us. Marcus raised his hand toward the shimmering barrier, feeling the energy field tingle against his skin like static electricity. Will it hurt? Her smile revealed those predatory teeth again. Oh yes, Captain. It will hurt terribly. But, then, all the best transformations do. He pressed his palm against the barrier, and the world exploded into pain and crimson light. The quantum field parted like water, and Princess Lyralii Shadowmere stepped through the breach with fluid grace. Her hand closed over his wounded arm, and Marcus felt something cold and hungry flow into his veins like liquid ice. The last thing he remembered was her whispered words, "Welcome to eternity, my dear captain. I do hope you enjoy the journey." Then, darkness claimed him, and the facility's ancient systems registered the first containment breach in over 2,000 years. Marcus awoke to the sensation of fire flowing through his veins and the taste of copper filling his mouth. His body felt wrong, as if someone had taken him apart at the molecular level and reassembled him according to a different blueprint. Every nerve ending screamed with hypersensitive awareness, and he could hear sounds that should have been impossible to detect. The facility's structural supports groaned under gravitational stress. Moisture condensed on metal surfaces with tiny crystalline plinks. Somewhere far above, small creatures scurried through ventilation ducts with the rhythm of miniature drums. When he opened his eyes, the world had changed. Colors were more vivid, edges sharper, and he could see clearly despite the chamber being illuminated only by the facility's emergency lighting. Princess Lyralii sat beside him, no longer confined behind the quantum barrier. Her pale skin seemed to glow with renewed vitality, and there was color in her cheeks that had not been there before. "How do you feel, Captain?" she asked, her voice carrying harmonics he had not noticed before. Or perhaps his hearing had been enhanced to detect subtleties that normal human ears could not process. Marcus tried to speak but found his throat raw and painful. When he touched his neck, he felt 2 puncture wounds that were already beginning to heal with unnatural speed. The memory of her bite rushed back to him along with the recollection of pain so intense it had driven him beyond consciousness. "Different," he managed to say, his voice rougher than usual. "Everything is different." She smiled, revealing those predatory teeth again, but now Marcus found them less threatening and more fascinating. "The transformation is not yet complete. Your human physiology is adapting to accommodate the changes I have made to your cellular structure. The process will continue for several days as your body learns to process life force in addition to normal nutrition." Marcus sat up slowly, testing his body's responses. The abdominal wound that had been slowly killing him was now completely healed, leaving only a faint scar that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. His enhanced strength felt different now, rawer and more primal. When he flexed his fingers, he could see veins standing out beneath skin that appeared slightly paler than before. "What exactly have you done to me?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "I have made you into something between human and vampire," she explained, rising gracefully to her feet. "You retain most of your human characteristics, but you now possess many of our advantages. Enhanced strength, accelerated healing, extended lifespan, and the ability to sense life force in living beings. In return, you are bound to me by threads of essence that cannot be broken by distance or time." Marcus tested his enhanced senses by focusing on Princess Lyralii herself. He could perceive her life force as a blazing crimson aura that pulsed with predatory hunger barely held in check. But, beneath that supernatural energy signature, he sensed something else. Loneliness so profound it felt like a physical weight, accumulated over centuries of solitary confinement. "I can feel what you feel," he said, surprised by the discovery. "The bond works both ways," she confirmed. "Though I have had many centuries to build emotional barriers that you lack. In time, you will learn to shield your thoughts and feelings from me, but that knowledge will come with experience." Marcus stood, marveling at how natural the movement felt despite his transformed physiology. "How much time do we have before this facility's automated systems alert someone to your escape?" "The containment breach has already triggered multiple alarm protocols," she said, moving toward the chamber's exit with fluid grace. "But this facility exists outside normal spacetime, remember. Communications with the outside galaxy are limited and unreliable. We have perhaps 6 hours before automated distress signals reach anyone who might respond." 6 hours. Marcus activated his tactical display and found that his armor's systems had adapted to his new physiology. His vital signs read as normal despite the radical changes to his biology, and the tactical computer showed enhanced reflexes and coordination that exceeded normal human parameters by significant margins. "Where do we go?" he asked. "My extraction point is compromised, and my squad is dead." Princess Lyralii's expression softened slightly, revealing a glimpse of something that might have been compassion. "I am sorry for your loss, Captain. But their sacrifice was not meaningless. You have succeeded in your mission to extract me from this prison, even if the circumstances were not what your commanders expected. They made their way through the facility's corridors at a pace that would have been impossible for baseline humans. Marcus found that his enhanced physiology allowed him to move with vampire-like speed and grace, though he still lacked the fluid perfection that marked Princess Lyralii as something truly inhuman. The whispers that had followed him during his initial descent were gone now, replaced by a profound silence that felt like held breath. The facility is dying, she explained as they navigated through the maze of passages. My imprisonment was the only thing keeping its ancient systems active. Without a supernatural entity to contain, it will begin shutting down within hours. The entire structure will collapse into the dimensional pocket that houses it. Marcus processed this information while checking his tactical map. Then, we need to reach the surface quickly. Indeed. But, first, there is something you must understand about our arrangement. She stopped walking and turned to face him directly. The bond between us grants you many advantages, but it also comes with certain requirements. You will need to feed, Captain. Not on normal food, though your body can still process it. You will need life force. The implications of that statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. You mean I have to kill people? Not necessarily kill, she said carefully. Life force can be harvested without destroying the source, though it requires considerable skill and restraint. But, yes, you will need to feed on the essence of living beings to maintain your enhanced abilities. Without regular nourishment, you will weaken and, eventually die. Marcus felt a surge of revulsion that was immediately followed by an unfamiliar hunger that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep in his transformed cells. The contradiction was disturbing, as if his human conscience was fighting against newly installed predatory instincts. I will not become a monster, he said firmly. Monsters are defined by their choices, not their nature, she replied. You could feed exclusively on criminals and enemy soldiers. You could limit yourself to small amounts of life force that cause no permanent harm. You could even learn to sustain yourself partially on willing donors who understand what they are giving. The hunger does not have to make you evil, Captain. They resumed walking toward the facility's surface levels while Marcus wrestled with the moral implications of his transformation. He had always prided himself on being a protector of human life, but now his continued existence required him to prey upon other living beings. The irony was not lost on him. How did your species originally evolve, he asked, partly to distract himself from the growing hunger and, partly because he genuinely wanted to understand. We did not evolve, Princess Lyralii said simply. We were created. Long ago, when the galaxy was young and filled with species whose names are now forgotten, there was a race called the Architects. They possessed technology that could manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level. They created us as the ultimate biological weapons. The revelation stopped Marcus in his tracks. You are artificial life forms? In a sense. The Architects took the best aspects of dozens of predatory species and combined them into a single organism designed for maximum efficiency at harvesting life force. We were their soldiers in a war against entities that existed partially outside normal reality. But, like all created weapons, we eventually turned against our creators. Marcus resumed walking, trying to process the implications. What happened to the Architects? We destroyed them, she said without emotion. It took centuries, but we systematically hunted down and eliminated every member of their species. We told ourselves it was justice for creating us as slaves, but the truth was simpler. They were a threat to our dominance, and we could not tolerate threats. The casual way she described genocide sent chills through Marcus's enhanced nervous system. And, after that? We ruled the galaxy for a time. Not openly, but from the shadows. We fed on whatever species we encountered, taking only what we needed to survive while remaining hidden from their awareness. It was a perfect arrangement that could have lasted forever. But perfection breeds complacency, and complacency breeds mistakes. They reached the facility's main level, where the emergency lighting cast strange shadows across walls covered in alien hieroglyphs. Marcus could now read some of the symbols, another aspect of his transformation that he had not expected. They spoke of containment protocols and warnings about the dangers of disturbing certain sleeping powers. What kind of mistakes? He asked. We began to see ourselves as gods rather than parasites, she said, leading him toward the main exit. Some of our kind started creating cults among the species we fed upon. They demanded worship and sacrifice, revealing themselves to populations that were not ready to understand what we were. The inevitable result was war. Marcus followed her through the facility's twisted corridors while pieces of ancient history fell into place. The species you preyed upon banded together to fight you. Not just to fight us. To eliminate us completely. They called it the Purge Wars, and they lasted for over 1,000 years. Entire star systems were sterilized rather than risk harboring vampire strongholds. Billions died on both sides before the survivors went into hiding. They reached the main entrance where Marcus had first breached the facility's defenses. The hole in the wall looked smaller somehow, as if the structure was already beginning to contract as its ancient systems shut down. Beyond the opening, Marcus could see the alien landscape under Valthera Prime's twin moons. "How many of you survived?" he asked. "I do not know," she admitted. "Perhaps hundreds scattered across the galaxy. Perhaps fewer. We learned to avoid contact with each other after the Purge Wars ended. Gathering in groups makes us easier to detect and destroy. I have been alone for over 2,000 years. The loneliness Marcus had sensed earlier suddenly made perfect sense. Princess Lyralii was not just physically imprisoned, but emotionally isolated from every member of her own species. The bond between them was not just about feeding or power. For her, it represented the first genuine companionship she had experienced in millennia. They stepped outside the facility and into the alien night. Marcus immediately noticed that his enhanced senses were even more acute in the open air. He could smell the chemical composition of the atmosphere, detect the electromagnetic signatures of distant energy sources, and hear the movements of small creatures hiding among the rocky outcroppings that dotted the landscape. "Your extraction point," Princess Lyralii said, gesturing toward a ridge approximately 2 kilometers away. "I assume your people will return when they realize communication has been lost." Marcus checked his tactical display and found that the emergency beacon was indeed transmitting again, though the signal was weak and intermittent. Standard protocol would bring a rescue team within 12 hours if the primary extraction failed. But that presented new problems now that his mission parameters had changed so dramatically. "They will expect me to return with you as a rescued prisoner," he said. "Not as someone who has been transformed into a supernatural predator." "Then, we must decide what story to tell them," she said, settling gracefully onto a flat boulder as if preparing for a long conversation. "What do your people know about vampires?" Marcus searched his memory and found only references from ancient Earth mythology and entertainment media. "We consider them fictional. Stories from before humanity developed spaceflight. Most humans would not believe they could be real." "Excellent. Then, we can craft a more palatable explanation for your recovery and my cooperation. Perhaps I am simply a member of a previously unknown alien species with unusual physiological requirements. Perhaps your near-death experience triggered some latent genetic enhancement that your military medical programs failed to detect." The suggestion had merit, but Marcus could see practical problems. "Military medical scanners are extremely sophisticated. They will detect the changes to my biology immediately." "Not if we provide them with a reasonable explanation first," she said with that predatory smile. "Your human military has been experimenting with biological enhancements for decades. If we present my transformation of you as an advanced medical procedure using alien biotechnology, they may accept it as an unexpected benefit rather than a threat." Marcus considered the proposal while watching the twin moons set behind the facility's twisted spires. Princess Lyralii was suggesting they lie to his superiors about the fundamental nature of their bond and his transformation. But the alternative was likely court-martial for him and imprisonment or vivisection for her. "What about your feeding requirements?" he asked. "How do we explain that?" "We do not explain it," she said simply. "We satisfy it discreetly. Your military undoubtedly has enemies who would make acceptable prey. Pirates, terrorists, hostile alien species. There are always legitimate targets for someone with our particular skills." The hunger that had been growing in Marcus's transformed physiology suddenly spiked at the mention of prey. For a moment, he could almost taste the life force of potential victims, and the sensation was both revolting and intoxicating. He forced himself to focus on practical concerns rather than the predatory instincts that were apparently now part of his nature. "This is going to be complicated," he said. "All the best relationships are," Princess Lyralii replied, her crimson eyes reflecting starlight like polished gems. "But, consider the alternative, Captain. You would be dead, and I would still be imprisoned. Instead, you are stronger than you have ever been, and I am free for the first time in 2 millennia. Surely some complications are a reasonable price for such benefits." Marcus activated his tactical communicator and began composing a report that would need to be carefully worded to avoid revealing too much truth. "How do I know you will not eventually grow tired of our arrangement and abandon me?" "Because you are the first genuinely interesting companion I have had in over 2,000 years, she said, standing and moving closer to him. "Do you realize how remarkable you are, Captain? Most beings confronted with a supernatural predator either flee in terror or attempt to destroy the threat. You negotiated a bargain and held to it even when the cost was your humanity. That level of courage and pragmatism is exceptionally rare." Marcus felt something warm flow through the bond between them, an emotion he could not quite identify but which felt like approval mixed with genuine affection. "You are not what I expected when I came here to rescue a princess." "And you are not what I expected from a human soldier," she replied. "Perhaps we will both benefit from having our expectations challenged." In the distance, Marcus could see lights moving across the landscape as search and rescue teams began their approach. Soon they would need to present a united front and convince his superiors that their arrangement was beneficial rather than dangerous. But, for now, in the quiet moments before their new life together truly began, Marcus found himself oddly content with the bargain he had made. Princess Lyralii moved to stand beside him, and he could feel her presence through the supernatural bond like warmth radiating through his enhanced physiology. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The human warrior and the vampire princess, bound by blood and necessity, ready to navigate a galaxy that had no idea what was coming. The medical bay aboard the TCN Resolute hummed with activity as Dr. Sarah Chan ran her fourth complete scan of Captain Marcus Chen's transformed physiology. Her expression grew more puzzled with each reading, and Marcus could sense her confusion through enhanced perception that allowed him to detect the subtle chemical changes associated with different emotional states. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Chen muttered, studying the holographic displays that showed Marcus's internal structure in impossible detail. "Your cellular regeneration rate has increased by over 300%. Your nervous system shows adaptations that should not be possible without extensive genetic modification. And your blood chemistry includes compounds that do not exist in any known periodic table." Marcus exchanged a brief glance with Princess Lyralii, who sat in the corner of the medical bay disguised as a recently rescued Vailthan noble. Their cover story was holding, but barely. According to their fabricated report, Princess Lyralii had used advanced alien biotechnology to save Marcus's life after his squad was killed. The technology supposedly worked by introducing beneficial symbiotic organisms that enhanced human physiology while requiring periodic treatments to maintain effectiveness. "The symbiotic enhancement process was quite painful," Marcus said, sticking to their prepared explanation. "But Princess Lyralii assured me it was necessary to prevent death from blood loss." Dr. Chen looked up from her displays with obvious skepticism. "Captain, I have been studying xenobiology for over a decade. I have never encountered anything that could produce these kinds of changes in human tissue without killing the subject. The integration of these organisms into your cellular structure should have triggered massive immune rejection." "Perhaps Vailthan biotechnology is more advanced than we assumed," Princess Lyralii interjected smoothly. Her voice carried subtle harmonics that Marcus now recognized as a mild form of mental influence designed to make her suggestions seem more reasonable. "My people have been working with biological enhancement for millennia." Dr. Chen turned her attention to Princess Lyralii with renewed interest. "I would very much like to study these symbiotic organisms. If we could understand how they work, the medical applications would be revolutionary." Marcus felt a surge of alarm through his bond with Princess Lyralii, followed immediately by cold calculation as she considered their options. The last thing they needed was detailed scientific analysis of the supernatural forces that had transformed him. "I am afraid that is not possible," Princess Lyralii said with apparent regret. "The organisms are extremely sensitive to environmental conditions. Removing them from Captain Chen's body for study would kill them instantly, and the process would likely kill him as well." Dr. Chen's expression showed she was not entirely convinced, but before she could press the issue further, the medical base communication system activated. "Dr. Chen, please report to Conference Room Alpha immediately," came the voice of Captain Rodriguez, the Resolute's commanding officer. Bring all medical files related to Captain Chan and our Veilthan guest. Marcus felt his enhanced hearing pick up subtle stress indicators in the captain's voice. Something was wrong, though he could not determine what from available information. He and Princess Lyralii had been aboard the Resolute for 3 days while military intelligence debriefed them about the mission to extract her from the Veilthan facility. So far, their story had held up under scrutiny. "Doctor," Marcus said carefully, "is there a problem with my medical clearance?" Dr. Chen saved her data files and began shutting down the medical scanners. "I honestly do not know, Captain. Your physiology is stable, but it is also completely unprecedented. Intelligence wants a full briefing on the enhancement process before they clear you for active duty." 20 minutes later, Marcus and Princess Lyralii found themselves seated across from a panel of senior officers and intelligence specialists in the Resolute's main briefing room. The atmosphere felt tense in a way that triggered Marcus's enhanced survival instincts. Through his bond with Princess Lyralii, he could sense that she was also detecting subtle threat indicators in their environment. Captain Rodriguez activated the room's main display screen, which showed a three-dimensional representation of the galaxy with dozens of red markers scattered across various star systems. "Captain Chen, Princess Lyralii, we have a situation that requires your immediate attention." Marcus studied the display and felt his enhanced perception identify patterns that would have been invisible to normal human senses. The red markers were concentrated in specific sectors, following trade routes and population centers rather than being randomly distributed. "What are we looking at, sir?" Marcus asked. "Vampire attacks," Captain Rodriguez said bluntly, watching their faces for reactions. Over the past 6 months, 17 different star systems have reported incidents involving creatures that match historical descriptions of vampires from Earth mythology. Ships found drifted in space with their crews drained of blood. Colony settlements discovered with populations missing and no signs of struggle. Research stations that went silent and were later found empty except for desiccated remains. Marcus felt Princess Lyralii's shock and alarm through their bond, followed quickly by cold fury as she realized the implications. Other vampires were not just active in the galaxy, but they were feeding openly and leaving evidence of their existence. "Sir," Marcus said carefully, "vampires are considered mythological creatures. Are we certain these attacks are not the work of some unknown alien species?" "That was our initial assumption," said Commander Sarah Wells, the ship's intelligence officer. "But 3 days ago, we received a transmission from one of the attack systems. The message was recorded by a survivor who managed to hide during the attack on Research Station Omega-7. The main display shifted to show grainy video footage taken with a handheld recording device. The image quality was poor, but Marcus could clearly see humanoid figures moving through a research facility with inhuman speed and grace. When one of them turned toward the camera, Marcus recognized the pale skin and crimson eyes that marked them as definitely vampires. The survivor described the attackers as beautiful but terrifying, with supernatural strength and speed, Commander Wells continued. He said they seemed to drain the life from their victims without actually drinking blood, though blood was certainly involved in the process. Princess Lyralii leaned forward slightly, her expression carefully controlled but her emotions bleeding through their bond as pure rage. "How many casualties?" "Over 3,000 confirmed dead across all 17 incidents," Captain Rodriguez replied grimly. "But here is where things become interesting. The attack stopped completely 48 hours ago, just after you were extracted from the Veilthan facility." The implication hung in the air like a sword. Marcus could see the suspicion in the officers' faces as they connected Princess Lyralii's rescue with the cessation of vampire attacks. Their cover story was about to collapse under the weight of circumstantial evidence. "Are you suggesting that Princess Lyralii is connected to these attacks?" Marcus asked, trying to buy time while he and Princess Lyralii figured out how to handle this development. "We are exploring all possibilities," Commander Wells said diplomatically. "It seems remarkably coincidental that vampire attacks would cease at precisely the same time we rescued someone from a facility designed to contain supernatural entities." Princess Lyralii stood gracefully, her movement carrying the fluid perfection that marked her as something more than human. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonic undertones that made everyone in the room lean forward slightly. "Captain Rodriguez, I understand your suspicion, but I must correct a fundamental misunderstanding about the facility where Captain Chen found me. It was not designed to contain supernatural entities in general. It was designed to contain me specifically." The admission sent shock waves through the room,
But Princess Lyralii continued before anyone could interrupt. I am indeed a vampire, though not in the way your human mythology describes.
My species are not undead creatures that fear sunlight and religious symbols. We are living organisms that have evolved to process life force as a form of sustenance. The Veilthan Empire imprisoned me over 2,000 years ago because they feared what I represented. Captain Rodriguez stood abruptly, his hand moving toward his sidearm before stopping as he realized the futility of the gesture.
Are you telling us that we have been harboring a vampire aboard this ship for 3 days?
You have been harboring someone who has not fed in over 2 millennia, Princess Lyralii said calmly. Someone who has every reason to be grateful for her rescue and no desire to harm the people who freed her. But, more importantly, you have been harboring someone who is absolutely furious about these attacks you have described. Marcus felt waves of ancient rage flowing through their bond as Princess Lyralii's carefully maintained emotional barriers began to crack. 2,000 years of forced restraint were giving way to fury that had been building since before human civilization existed. The creatures responsible for these attacks are rogues, she continued, her crimson eyes beginning to glow with inner fire. They are violating every principle of sustainable feeding that has allowed my species to survive. They are drawing attention to our existence in exactly the way that led to the Purge Wars millennia ago. Dr. Chen, who had been silent throughout the briefing, suddenly spoke up. The symbiotic enhancement Captain Chen received.
It was not biotechnology, was it?
Princess Lyralii turned her gaze toward the doctor with something that might have been respect.
No.
I transformed him into something between human and vampire in order to save his life. The bond between us allows me to sustain myself on a portion of his life force while granting him enhanced abilities and extended lifespan.
The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled officers.
Marcus could hear their hearts beating faster and smell the adrenaline flooding their systems as they processed the implications. But, before panic could set in, Princess Lyralii continued speaking.
Captain Chen is not a threat to anyone aboard this ship. Neither am I, for that matter.
But, the rogues who have been conducting these attacks most certainly are. They are making the same mistakes that led to near extinction for my species in the past.
Commander Wells activated her recording device.
Are you saying you will help us stop these rogue vampires? I am saying that stopping them is essential for my own survival, Princess Lyralii replied grimly. If they continue these feeding frenzies, they will eventually trigger another Purge War.
The galactic community will unite to destroy every vampire in known space, including me.
I have no intention of returning to imprisonment or facing extinction because other members of my species lack basic survival instincts. Marcus stood and moved to stand beside Princess Lyralii, feeling the bond between them pulse with shared determination.
With respect, sir, I believe Princess Lyralii represents our best hope of understanding and stopping this threat.
She knows how vampires think and hunt. She understands their capabilities and weaknesses. Captain Rodriguez looked back and forth between them, clearly struggling with the decision.
Captain Chen, are you certain your judgment is not compromised by this supernatural bond? Marcus considered the question carefully before answering.
Sir, the bond allows me to sense Princess Lyralii's emotions and intentions directly. She is genuinely committed to stopping these attacks. But, even if that were not the case, the strategic value of having a vampire ally is too significant to ignore.
Dr. Chen cleared her throat nervously.
If I may, Captain Rodriguez, from a medical standpoint, both subjects appear to be in complete control of their faculties.
Captain Chen's enhancement seems to have improved his cognitive function rather than degrading it.
The room fell silent as Captain Rodriguez weighed his options. Marcus could see the calculation in the man's eyes as he considered the potential benefits and risks of accepting vampire assistance against a vampire threat. Finally, the captain activated the ship's internal communication system.
All senior staff to Conference Room Alpha immediately.
We have a new mission profile to discuss. As the room began to fill with additional personnel, Princess Lyralii leaned closer to Marcus and whispered, "Are you prepared for what comes next, Captain?
Hunting rogues of my species will be more dangerous than anything you have previously experienced."
Marcus felt the predatory hunger that had been growing within him surge at the mention of hunting. The sensation was disturbing but also oddly exhilarating, as if his transformed physiology was eager to test its capabilities against worthy opponents.
"I am prepared," he said quietly. "But, I have one question. You seem personally offended by these attacks. Is there more to this than just survival instincts?"
Princess Lyreliai's expression darkened, and Marcus felt echoes of ancient pain flowing through their bond.
The rogues are not just threatening our species' survival, Captain. They are desecrating everything we once stood for. Before the Purge Wars, vampires were apex predators who hunted with precision and restraint. We took what we needed and left our prey alive to recover. We were shadows that fed without being seen. She paused, and Marcus could sense memories of a time when vampires had been something more than mere monsters. These rogues have abandoned all pretense of civilization. They are acting like animals, driven by hunger rather than intelligence. They have forgotten that we are supposed to be better than our appetites. Marcus understood. Princess Lyreliai was not just defending her species' survival. She was defending their honor, such as it was. And that made their mission personal in a way that would drive them both to succeed or die trying. The merchant vessel Starlight's Promise drifted silently in the asteroid field of the Kepler 442 system, its hull scarred by energy weapon impacts and its crew compartments empty of life. Marcus floated beside the airlock in his modified combat suit, using enhanced senses to analyze the ship's condition while Princess Lyreliai examined the scene through their supernatural bond. 2 weeks had passed since the Resolute's crew had accepted their unlikely alliance, and this was their third investigation of vampire attacks. Each crime scene told the same story. Ships or settlements found completely drained of life, with no survivors and minimal physical damage. The attackers were methodical, efficient, and utterly ruthless in their feeding. 17 crew members, Marcus reported through his tactical communicator. All found in their quarters or duty stations. No signs of struggle, no defensive wounds. They appear to have been killed while going about their normal routines. Princess Lyreliai's voice came through their private communication link, a benefit of their bond that allowed mental contact across short distances. The rogues are using fear paralysis. It is a psychic ability that freezes prey in place during feeding. Extremely effective, but it requires close proximity and leaves distinctive residual energy patterns. Marcus activated his suit's advanced sensors and began scanning for the energy signatures Princess Lyreliai had described. The readings were faint but detectable, concentrated around the ship's central corridors where the crew would have gathered during an emergency. "I am reading psychic residue throughout the vessel," he reported. "But something is different about this attack. The energy patterns are more chaotic than the previous sites." Through their bond, Marcus felt Princess Lyreliai's sudden interest and concern. "Chaotic how?" "Describe the variations." Marcus moved deeper into the ship while analyzing the sensor data. Multiple overlapping signatures, but they do not seem coordinated. It looks like several different psychic imprints layered over each other without any attempt at synchronization. "That should not be possible," Princess Lyreliai said, and Marcus could sense her confusion through their connection. "Vampires do not hunt in groups. We are solitary predators by nature. Attempting to feed simultaneously would create psychic interference that makes the process extremely difficult." Marcus reached the ship's central hub and immediately understood why the energy patterns seemed chaotic. The crew had been killed by at least 3 different vampires working independently, their fear paralysis fields overlapping in ways that should have been counterproductive. "Princess," he said quietly, "I think we are dealing with something more complicated than rogue vampires." Before she could respond, Marcus's enhanced hearing detected the almost silent whisper of movement behind him. He spun around to find himself facing a creature that was recognizably vampire but wrong in fundamental ways. Its pale skin was marked with strange tattoos that seemed to move and shift in the low lighting. Its crimson eyes held in wild, hungry look that spoke of intelligence corrupted by endless appetite. "Another hybrid," the creature said, its voice carrying harmonics that tried to induce paralysis but failed against Marcus's enhanced resistance. "How delightfully unexpected. And bonded to one of the old ones, judging by the energy signature. This should be interesting." Marcus drew his modified plasma sidearm, a weapon that had been enhanced with technology derived from the Veilthan facility. "You are responsible for the attacks." The rogue vampire laughed, revealing teeth that had been artificially sharpened into surgical instruments. "Responsible? I am merely participating. These feeding frenzies were not my idea, hybrid. They are the result of something far more significant than simple hunger." Marcus felt Princess Lyreliai's alarm through their bond as she processed the implications of what the rogue had said. "Ask it about the others," she urged mentally. "Find out how many are involved and who is organizing them. Who is coordinating the attacks?
Marcus demanded, keeping his weapon trained on the rogue despite knowing that conventional weapons were largely ineffective against vampires.
Coordinating?
The rogue tilted its head in a gesture that would have seemed curious if not for the predatory gleam in its eyes.
There is no coordination, hybrid. We simply follow the call when it comes. The old hunger awakens, and we must feed. It has been so very long since we were permitted to hunt openly.
Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems.
Permitted by whom? The rogue's expression shifted to something that might have been reverence mixed with fear.
By the Void Caller, of course.
The one who remembers the glory days before the purges. The one who promises that we can reclaim our rightful place as apex predators of the galaxy.
Through his bond with Princess Lyralii, Marcus felt a surge of recognition followed by absolute terror. The name meant something to her, something that filled her with dread on a fundamental level.
Impossible, Princess Lyralii whispered through their mental link. He was destroyed during the Purge Wars.
I saw his ship burning in the Andromeda Nebula over 2,000 years ago. The rogue vampire's enhanced hearing apparently caught her whispered words, and its expression lit up with malicious delight.
Ah, the old one speaks. Tell me, ancient princess, do you still believe Valdris the Eternal was destroyed? Do you still cling to the comfortable lie that the most powerful of our kind could be killed by mere mortals with energy weapons?
Marcus felt Princess Lyralii's emotional barriers crumble as the implications hit her.
Valdris, apparently, was not just another vampire.
He was something far more dangerous, and his survival meant that everything she thought she knew about the current situation was wrong.
Valdris was the first of us to achieve true immortality, Princess Lyralii explained through their mental connection while her consciousness reeled with shock. He transcended normal vampire physiology millennia ago. If he is alive, he is not just organizing these attacks.
He is building towards something much worse. Marcus kept his weapon trained on the rogue while processing this information.
What does he want?
The rogue vampire began to circle him with predatory grace, moving with speed that would have been invisible to normal human perception.
He wants what all vampires have always wanted, hybrid. To feed without restriction. To hunt without hiding. To reclaim our position as the dominant lifeform in this galaxy.
That would trigger another Purge War, Marcus said, tracking the rogue's movement with enhanced reflexes.
Every species in the galaxy would unite to destroy your kind.
Perhaps.
But Valdris has spent 2 millennia preparing for that possibility.
He has technologies now that did not exist during the last purges. He has allies among species that the galactic community has never encountered. Most importantly, he has patience and cunning that come from surviving the first attempt to exterminate us. Marcus felt his enhanced instincts screaming warnings as the rogue vampire's movements became increasingly erratic. Whatever psychic influence was driving it to participate in the feeding frenzies was also affecting its reasoning and self-control.
How many vampires has he contacted?
Marcus asked, trying to extract useful intelligence before the situation deteriorated further.
Hundreds, perhaps thousands, the rogue replied, its voice becoming more animalistic with each word.
We who survived the purges. We who have hidden in the shadows for millennia while lesser species inherited the galaxy.
We who remember what it feels like to be apex predators rather than scavengers.
Through his bond with Princess Lyralii, Marcus felt her working through the strategic implications at superhuman speed. If Valdris had successfully contacted and influenced hundreds of vampires, the attacks they had investigated represented only the beginning of something much larger and more catastrophic. Marcus, she said through their mental link, you need to end this conversation and return to the Resolute immediately.
If this creature is under Valdris's influence, he knows about us now.
He knows I survived, and he knows about our bond.
We are no longer hunting rogues.
We are potential targets. The rogue vampire suddenly stopped moving and turned to face Marcus directly, its expression shifting from predatory hunger to something resembling triumph.
Valdris sends his greetings to Princess Lyralii Shadowmere.
He is quite interested in meeting the vampire who chose to bond herself to a human rather than reclaim her heritage. Marcus fired his plasma weapon without hesitation, the enhanced energy bolt striking the rogue center mass and burning a hole through its chest. But, instead of collapsing, the creature merely looked down at the wound and laughed.
Enhanced weapons, how thoughtful.
But, you will find that we have been enhanced as well, hybrid.
Valdris has granted us certain improvements that make us far more durable than the vampires your princess remembers from ancient history.
The creature's wound began healing with visible speed, tissue regenerating faster than Marcus had thought possible even for vampires. Whatever Valdris had done to his followers, it had significantly increased their supernatural resilience. Marcus activated his emergency beacon and began retreating toward the ship's airlock while keeping his weapon trained on the increasingly unstable rogue. "Princess, this situation is deteriorating rapidly.
I need an extraction."
"Already en route," she replied through their bond. "But, Marcus, there is something you need to know about Valdris before we encounter him directly. He is not just the most powerful vampire in existence.
He is also completely insane."
The rogue vampire began advancing toward Marcus with renewed aggression, its movements becoming less coordinated but more violent.
"Valdris remembers you, Princess.
He remembers how you opposed his plans during the final days of the Vampire Empire.
He very much wants to discuss your betrayal with you personally."
Marcus reached the airlock and began cycling through the decompression sequence while firing continuous bursts at the rogue to slow its advance. The creature absorbed the damage without apparent concern, its enhanced physiology repairing injuries almost as quickly as they were inflicted. "Marcus," Princess Lyralii said urgently through their mental connection, "whatever happens, do not let that creature touch you. Valdris has taught his followers how to drain life force through direct contact, and they are not constrained by the limitations that govern normal vampire feeding." The airlock finished cycling just as the rogue vampire reached Marcus's position. But, instead of attacking immediately, the creature paused and tilted its head as if listening to something only it could hear. "Valdris wishes me to convey a message," the rogue said, its voice taking on harmonic overtones that suggested telepathic communication. "He says to tell Princess Lyralii that her human pet will make an interesting addition to his collection of enhanced servants. He looks forward to demonstrating the improvements he has made to vampire bonding techniques."
Marcus felt Princess Lyralii's fury explode through their connection like a physical force.
The normally controlled vampire princess was losing her millennia of emotional restraint as protective instincts overrode rational thought. "That ancient bastard wants to threaten my bonded partner," she snarled through their mental link. "He is about to learn why I survived the Purge Wars when so many others did not." The rogue vampire suddenly convulsed as if struck by an invisible force, its enhanced physiology apparently insufficient to protect it from whatever Princess Lyralii was doing through their supernatural connection. Marcus felt power flowing through their bond like liquid lightning as she channeled abilities he had not known she possessed. "Tell Valdris," she said through Marcus's voice, the sound carrying harmonic overtones that made the ship's hull vibrate with resonant frequency, "that Princess Lyralii Shadowmere is no longer in hiding. Tell him that if he wants to reclaim the old ways, he will have to go through me first. And tell him that I have spent 2,000 years learning new techniques that he cannot possibly imagine." The rogue vampire collapsed as supernatural energy overloaded its enhanced nervous system. But, even as it fell, Marcus could see its lips moving in what looked like a final message to its distant master. Marcus triggered the airlock's emergency ejection and found himself floating in space as the Resolute's rescue shuttle approached. Through his bond with Princess Lyralii, he could feel her already planning their next moves in what was rapidly becoming a war between different factions of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. "Princess," he said quietly as the shuttle's tractor beam locked onto his suit, "I think we are about to find out just how far our bond can be pushed."
Her response carried echoes of ancient power barely held in check.
"Indeed we are, my dear captain. And I suspect that by the time this is over, the galaxy will remember why vampires were once considered the apex predators of known space." The ancient dreadnought Nightfall Ascendant hung in the void between star systems like a monument to forgotten nightmares. Its hull stretched for over 10 kilometers, constructed from materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange energy patterns flickered across its surface in geometric designs that hurt to look at directly, and its weapon arrays bristled with technologies that predated most known civilizations. Marcus floated in his enhanced combat suit beside Princess Lyralii, both of them concealed behind a debris field that had once been a colonial fleet battle group. The 12 ships had been among the most advanced vessels in human space, equipped with experimental weapons and shielding systems. Now they were twisted metal sculptures, their crews drained of life while their ships were systematically dissected for useful components. "Valdris has been busy," Princess Lyralii said through their mental bond, her consciousness focused on analyzing the massive vampire vessel. "That dreadnought incorporates technology from at least 6 different extinct civilizations. He has been collecting more than just vampire followers during his exile. Marcus studied the ship through his enhanced visual systems, noting details that would have been invisible to normal human perception. The Nightfall Ascendant was not just large, it was actively hostile to the surrounding spacetime. Reality seemed to bend slightly around its hull, as if the vessel's mere presence was enough to warp the fundamental laws of physics. How many vampires could a ship that size support? Marcus asked while recording tactical data for the fleet commanders who were hopefully still alive to receive it. Thousands, if they are willing to accept minimal life support requirements, Princess Lyralii replied. But Valdris would not gather so many of our kind in one location unless he was preparing for something catastrophic. Vampires are not social creatures by nature. Bringing us together requires either desperate circumstances or overwhelming compulsion. Through their bond, Marcus felt Princess Lyralii wrestling with memories that were older than human civilization. She was remembering the last time Valdris had gathered vampire forces on this scale, and the memory filled her with dread that made Marcus's enhanced nervous system spike with sympathetic alarm. What happened the last time he did this? Marcus asked, though he suspected he did not want to know the answer. The siege of Arcturus Prime, she replied, her mental voice carrying echoes of ancient trauma. He convinced over 2,000 vampires to join him in a direct assault on the galactic capital. The battle lasted for 6 months and ended with the complete sterilization of 3 star systems. Over 50 billion sentient beings died before we finally drove him off. Marcus processed the implications while watching automated systems extract useful materials from the destroyed fleet. If Valdris was preparing for another siege-scale operation, the current vampire attacks were not random feeding frenzies. They were recruitment demonstrations designed to gather followers for a much larger campaign. Princess, Marcus said carefully, if Valdris has been planning this for 2 millennia, what makes you think we can stop him with a single bonded pair? Her response came with a surge of determination that flowed through their connection like liquid steel. Because he is making the same mistake he made during the original Purge Wars. He assumes that all vampires are driven purely by hunger and the desire for dominance. He does not understand that some of us have evolved beyond those base instincts. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, his enhanced sensors detected movement within the vampire dreadnought. Massive bay doors were opening along its hull, revealing launch bays filled with smaller vessels that looked like nothing Marcus had ever seen. They moved with organic fluidity despite being clearly artificial, and they radiated the same reality-warping effects as their mothership. We need to leave, Princess Lyralii said urgently. Those are hunter-killers, designed specifically for tracking and destroying targets that Valdris considers threats. If they detect our energy signatures, they will pursue us across the entire galaxy. Marcus activated his suit's stealth systems and began moving away from the debris field while the hunter-killers emerged from the dreadnought like a swarm of metallic predators. Each vessel was roughly the size of a colonial marine fighter, but they moved with intelligence and purpose that suggested they were more than mere machines. Are they controlled by vampires? Marcus asked while plotting an escape route toward the system's edge. Worse, Princess Lyralii replied through their bond. They are vampires. Valdris has found a way to merge our consciousness with mechanical systems, creating hybrid entities that combine vampire abilities with technological advantages. Each hunter-killer contains the mind of a volunteer who gave up their physical form to serve his cause. The concept was horrifying enough that Marcus felt his enhanced physiology react with instinctive revulsion. Vampires were already supernatural predators with abilities that challenged natural law. The idea of combining those capabilities with advanced technology created possibilities that his mind did not want to contemplate. Marcus reached the edge of the debris field and activated his emergency beacon, hoping that the Resolute was still close enough to receive the signal. But, before he could establish communication, his sensors detected one of the hunter-killers moving toward his position with obvious intent. Princess, he said quietly, I think we have been detected. Impossible, she replied, but Marcus could feel her alarm through their connection. Your stealth systems should be invisible to normal vampire senses. The hunter-killer approached with predatory grace, its hull shifting and adapting as it moved through space. When it was approximately 50 meters away, it suddenly stopped and hovered in place as if studying Marcus through sensors he could not detect. Then, it spoke, its voice transmitted directly into Marcus's mind through some form of telepathic communication. Captain Marcus Chen, the hunter-killer said, its mental voice carrying harmonic overtones that identified it as definitely vampire in origin. Princess Lyralii Shadowmere. Valdris the Eternal extends his greetings and a formal invitation to join him aboard the Nightfall Ascendant.
Marcus felt Princess Lyreliai's shock through their bond as she recognized something about the hunter-killer's telepathic signature.
That voice, she whispered through their mental connection.
I know that voice. It belongs to someone who was supposed to be dead.
Prince Zirian Voidheart, the hunter-killer continued, apparently reading Princess Lyreliai's recognition.
I was wondering when you would realize who was addressing you. It has been quite some time since our last conversation, has it not?
Through their bond, Marcus felt Princess Lyreliai's emotional barriers completely collapse as the full implications hit her. Prince Zirian had been her bondmate during the final years of the Vampire Empire, the closest thing to a romantic partner that immortal predators could maintain. She had believed him dead for over 2,000 years. Zirian, she said through Marcus's voice, the sound carrying such pain that the hunter-killer actually recoiled slightly.
What has Valdris done to you?
He has given me freedom, the hunter-killer replied, moving closer despite Princess Lyreliai's obvious distress.
Freedom from the limitations of physical form. Freedom from the endless hunger that defines our existence.
Freedom to serve a cause greater than mere survival.
Marcus could feel Princess Lyreliai's grief and rage warring for control through their bond.
The vampire she had loved had not just survived, he had been transformed into something that barely qualified as alive. But, beneath those emotions, Marcus sensed something else.
A cold calculation as she began to understand what Valdris was really offering. Show yourself to me, Princess Lyreliai demanded. Let me see what you have become.
The hunter-killer's hull began to shift and reconfigure until a section became transparent, revealing the interior of the vessel. What Marcus saw inside would haunt his enhanced memory for the rest of his extended life. Prince Zirian's body was integrated directly into the ship's control systems, his nervous system merged with organic circuits that pulsed with the same bioluminescence Marcus had seen in the Vailthan facility. His physical form was recognizably vampire but wrong in ways that defy description. Technology and biology had been combined so thoroughly that it was impossible to determine where one ended and the other began.
As you can see, Prince Zirian said, his voice now carrying mechanical overtones that made him sound like a recording rather than a living being, I have transcended the limitations that once constrained us. I no longer require feeding schedules or worry about discovery by lesser species. I exist purely to serve Valdris's vision of vampire supremacy.
Princess Lyreliai's response came through their bond as pure fury that made Marcus's enhanced nervous system scream with sympathetic pain.
He has turned you into a machine. A tool. You are not transcendent, Zirian. You are enslaved.
I prefer to think of it as evolution, Prince Zirian replied, but Marcus could detect uncertainty in his mechanical voice. Valdris has shown us a path beyond the endless cycle of hunting and hiding that has defined our existence since the Purge Wars. We can reclaim our rightful place as apex predators without fear of retaliation. Through their bond, Marcus felt Princess Lyreliai's consciousness reaching out toward the hunter-killer with abilities he had not known she possessed. She was attempting some form of direct mental contact that bypassed normal telepathic channels. Zirian, she said, her mental voice carrying harmonics that resonated with frequencies deep within vampire neurology.
Remember who you were before Valdris found you. Remember what we meant to each other.
Remember the dreams we shared about finding a way for our kind to exist without becoming monsters. The hunter-killer suddenly, convulsed as if struck by an invisible force, its hull rippling with energy discharges that suggested internal conflict between different control systems. Prince Zirian's integrated form writhed within the transparent section as competing impulses warred for dominance. Lyreliai, he said, his voice temporarily free of mechanical overtones, what have I become? What has he done to me? But, the moment of clarity lasted only seconds before the hunter-killer's systems reasserted control. When Prince Zirian spoke again, his voice had returned to the flat mechanical tone that marked him as little more than a sophisticated tool. Valdris anticipated that you might attempt to interfere with his enhanced servants, Prince Zirian said, moving closer to Marcus's position with renewed predatory intent. He has prepared countermeasures that should prevent such disruptions in the future. Marcus felt Princess Lyreliai's desperation spike through their bond as she realized that her former bondmate was lost to her, transformed into something that retained his memories and personality but was fundamentally enslaved to Valdris's will. Marcus, she said through their mental connection, I need you to do something that you are not going to like.
I need you to kill Prince Zirian. The request hit Marcus like a physical blow. Princess, that is your former bondmate. Even if he is being controlled, there might be a way to free him.
There is no freedom from what Valdris has done to him, she replied, her mental voice carrying absolute certainty.
The integration process is irreversible.
The best I can do for Zirian is give him the mercy of a clean death before he is forced to commit atrocities in Valdris's name. Marcus drew his enhanced plasma weapon while struggling with the moral implications of Princess Lyraliai's request. He was being asked to kill someone who had been forcibly transformed into a weapon against their will. But he could sense through their bond that Princess Lyraliai was right. There was no saving Prince Zirian from what he had become. I am sorry, Zirian, Princess Lyraliai said through Marcus's voice as he took aim at the hunter-killer's transparent section.
I am sorry I was not there to prevent this from happening to you.
Marcus fired his weapon, the enhanced energy bolt striking the hunter-killer's exposed core and triggering a cascade failure that consumed the entire vessel in seconds. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of space, but Marcus felt Princess Lyraliai's anguish through their bond like a supernova of grief and rage. When the debris finished expanding, they were alone in the void with only the massive bulk of the Nightfall Ascendant in the distance. But Marcus could sense that their confrontation with Prince Zirian had been observed and analyzed by Valdris himself. He knows we are here, Princess Lyraliai said through their bond, her mental voice carrying exhaustion that spoke of emotional trauma beyond normal comprehension. And now he knows that I am willing to destroy what I love to prevent him from using it against innocent people. Marcus activated his emergency beacon and began transmitting their location to the Resolute while watching the dreadnought for signs of response.
What does that mean for our mission?
It means that Valdris will no longer underestimate us, she replied, her consciousness already focusing on the strategic implications of their encounter. But it also means that he will target us personally rather than treating us as a minor threat to be eliminated by subordinates.
The next time we meet him, it will be face to face.
Marcus felt the Resolute's tractor beam lock onto his suit as the rescue shuttle approached through the debris field.
Princess, when that meeting happens, will our bond be enough to stand against someone with Valdris's power and experience?
Her response came with a surge of determination that made Marcus's enhanced physiology spike with sympathetic adrenaline.
I do not know, my dear Captain. But I do know that we represent something Valdris cannot understand or replicate. We are not predator and prey, or master and servant.
We are genuine partners who chose our bond freely and maintain it through mutual respect rather than domination.
As the shuttle bay closed around them, Marcus felt Princess Lyraliai's grief beginning to transform.